I'm Justin Davis, and this is Joe Camp's RC. Hey, how's it going? I'm Justin Davis. Welcome to my shop. We're going to do an RC review today of this new Team Magic E5 HX 1/10 scale RC truck. Now this came to me about a month ago and I've been driving it and bashing it around and it still works. Nothing broke on it so far. But we're going to test this on 2 and 3S, but we're also going to push it a step further. We're going to take it out to a local RC track, let some guys out there drive it, see what they think about it. Guys that drive and race to give us their opinion on this RC monster truck. Now we're also going to take it a step further and I'm going to do something different than the other reviewers did. We're actually going to take this one and run it straight into some deep water because this has an 80 amp Hobbywing ESC on here and it claims to be waterproof. We're going to see if this entire system is waterproof or not. I was told at the local RC track that 2 other guys the same morning that we drove this one through the water went home with 2 cars that weren't working. So we'll see if this one holds up to the water test and to some 15-foot bike jumps. So we're going to take it to a bike track as well and see if we can get some ultimate air on this and see how hard we can land it, smack it down before anything breaks on it, or if anything does at all. Sit back and enjoy the driving footage, and then we'll come back in the studio and we'll take a little closer look at what's under the hood.
But that's what you get when Wu-Tang raised. Y'all can't stop me. Go hard like I got an 808 in my heartbeat. And I'm eating at the beat like it gave a little speed to a great white shark on shark. We walk. Gonna go far. Deuces goodbye. I got the world to see. My girl, she wanna see gold. She's a make you a believer now. Never everything for it grown. That validation comes from giving it back to the people now. Sing this song and it goes like, raise those hands. This is our party. We came here to live life like nobody was watching. I got my city right behind me. If I fall, they got me. Learn from that failure, gain humility, and then we keep marching ourselves. This is all. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can hold us. Like the ceiling can hold us. This is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can hold us. Like the ceiling can hold us.
All right guys, we're back in the shop now and hopefully you guys enjoyed that bash and crash and straight through the water test. We did go straight through the water. We didn't go around on the side and skirt the water. We just went straight into it, sort of up to the top of the hood, deep into some of those mud puddles. And my biggest question is, will it still run? Will it still plug in and fire up? Will the brushless motor still work? All these questions that a lot of you guys have. Did it leak? And let's just go ahead and pop the top off here. And I'll turn on the transmitter for you, set that down, move the canopy over to the side here, the body, and let's plug it in. Let's see if it's still working after all of that water. And we were also driving it in the rain that day too, so it was completely wet outside. So let's check out the steering servo. Still working. And like the guy at the track said, there was 2 other cars that same day that went home completely trashed by the water. So I was told actually not to run this car if I wanted to take it home and still have it working. But since I got this for free for a review, well, I just told them to do what they wanted with it and run it around the track as hard as they could on 2 and 3S and see what happened to this thing and see if it can handle it. Now, some of my favorite cars out there that are China made are like the DHK Hobby RC cars, and those do pretty well. They already have a lot of metal upgrades on it, and this one is probably under $400 right now on GearBest. But looking at this one, I didn't see a lot of those metal upgrades, so I was kind of concerned about how this was going to hold up. My biggest test for this review was going to be durability for this car, because if you're going to spend around $350 to $400 on an RC car, a basher, you want it to hold up and you want it to last. You don't want to have to be looking all over the internet for parts. Now, the steering servo is absolutely fine. Everything is good there. It didn't have any mud caked up inside it. I took it home and actually sprayed it off with the water hose completely, inside and out here, front to back, top and bottom. And it's probably been about a week since I sprayed it off and plugged it in today. So if any water did get inside any of the components, hopefully most of it's gone now and dried up. It looks like the receiver box did its job as well, keeping the water off the receiver. And the Hobbywing 80 amp ESC appears to have worked. Now let's test the throttle and see if it holds up with the throttle test. So it looks like everything is completely fine with the car. So pretty happy about that. So I think that's a thumbs up for me that it actually does work in water as advertised. And sometimes they'll say waterproof, but they're actually not. And we'll just check out that steering from the front now, left, right. Everything appears to be fine, totally fine. And also, all of our LEDs are still on. It was cool during that day during my test because it was really overcast, and when it is nice and overcast you can really see the LEDs really well. Now let's just spin it around and look at the back side where that wheelie bar is. The wheelie bar held up pretty well. I did run it on the concrete and I did some wheelies on the concrete. This thing really kicks when you put it into high throttle. It really does kick a wheelie super fast. And my biggest concern was that some of these links would pop off in some of those really big jumps on the bike track. I thought that 15 feet in the air, once this thing hit the ground, it would have some stuff pop off and the steering would, maybe the front steering would go off. But 4 LEDs back here also held up. So all 4 LEDs are still on and none of those shorted out as well. So they're pretty well wired inside here. And also the wing back here, I thought this wing might actually snap, but on some of the really hard upside down landings that I had on the concrete and the gravel over there on that rock hill that you guys saw me playing around on, the gravel hill, it held up pretty well. So not a lot of complaints with durability so far. And over here where the receiver's wired up and inside this box here, you can see everything is sealed off top to bottom here, and there's no open holes on the top of it like some of the other receiver boxes. Sometimes there's a little bit of an open gap in some of those boxes and water can get inside and just fry out the receiver. They have this one completely enclosed, and they actually have a rubber seal around this top part right here where this screws down around the antenna. So that's pretty cool. And it doesn't have a super high antenna for something else to break off. It had a decent range on it as well. I didn't go into fail-safe mode driving it, even doing my road test with it. Now I also noticed that they did put some kind of rubber casing around the on-off button as well, so that's protected from water, and that didn't short out either. Now I feel like this motor could be a little bit bigger, but I did see from other reviewers that this pinion is also upgradable. I think it's an 11T pinion, and it should give it a little more torque, a little more power. But I feel like this motor could possibly be a little bit bigger for this RC car, and it felt like it struggled to get up some inclines at certain points on 2S. So if you're just kind of cruising around and having some general bashing, I think you can have fun with a 2S 5,000 milliamp battery. You're probably going to get 15 minutes to 20 minutes drive time out of a 5,000 2S. And I'm running a Venom on here, so that's what I chose to run on this one. Now it doesn't come with a battery, so you have to provide your own battery for it. But this motor is actually, it is a pretty decent motor spec-wise. It's 3650 4400 kV motor. Now I just want to give you guys a bird's eye view of the way this servo is set up in here, and normally I see some type of servo arm coming off the top here going to this steering mechanism right here, but it's actually coming underneath, not on the very bottom of the frame, but it comes out a hole right here. So you might be able to see that there, just underneath there. You can see that arm sticking out there. And if I move this, you can see it moving underneath the car. This is a 15 kilogram high torque waterproof servo. So again, you have another waterproof, completely waterproof component on here. They do have some kind of rubber grommet around where the wire comes out, so it looks like it might also have some type of glue around it or inside it to keep water outside of the servo. So it is doing its job, and it's completely waterproof inside this housing. Kind of see from the side, it's completely encased. And the layout they have going here, it looks like it's going to be pretty easy. So if you had a motor go out, there's 4 screws down here, and you can take those off and just pull this whole motor out and pop a new one on there. And it does look like it has quick releases here for where the wires do attach to the ESC right there. They just come right out, so you can just pop a new one on. You see how that pops out? Just connected by bullet connectors. So that's kind of cool that those are easily replaceable. Now, speaking of connectors, those are pretty well waterproofed. Now, over on this side right here, I did notice, and you guys look a little bit closer here, I did see some corrosion on this pinion right here. So it did take a little bit of corrosion, so it's not perfect, I would say, by any means, but you can see that there is a little bit of corrosion here. Let's get this come back in focus. So it did take some type of damage. It's not totally perfect, but the car is still running, and if you really wanted to, I could pull this off and just kind of clean that pinion up a little bit, and it would be totally fine. Now, while it's kind of amazing that this actually did survive the water test and the bash test, I mean, 15-foot jumps, I saw their original trailer on this car, and they had jumped it off a cliff and landed on a beach. And I'm not talking about, like, say, like a 20-foot cliff. It looked like a 30-foot cliff. It was gigantic. Now, I don't know whether they fake that using the video or not, but I've taken other RC cars, like the DHK hobby cars, and I've jumped them off houses and things and landed them out in the middle of the yard and bashed them around. And this truck actually took a really hardcore beating. It did a lot of cartwheels, rolling around, and none of the steering mechanisms popped off, none of the links popped off. All of the suspension held up. I saw another reviewer, I think his name is Aussie RC Playground or something like that. He does mostly cars. It's pretty much all he does, and he actually had one of these pop off. So one of his shocks actually popped out of the top part of it from the bottom part. So that can happen on different cars, and different parts can fail at any time, but I'm pretty impressed that all this held up. And one of the most durable things about this whole truck probably is the truck body itself. It actually held up really well, because I've had other bodies that when they get smashed around on the concrete or on the course, they start to crease up, or they just flat out break. And my son was actually pulling a truck out of a box the other day, and he lifted up on the truck body itself and actually snapped the side of the truck body. So it is a pretty high quality truck body, and it's pretty durable. And you guys can see it from the front there. There's some scratches on it, but it's still in pretty good condition, considering I've been running this for a couple weeks and a lot of batteries. Now, one of the other things that reviewers talk about a lot when they're reviewing RC cars is how well did the tires hold up? Did the tread wear down? Did the tire actually explode and the foam rubber on the inside of the tire come out? Well, this one didn't do that, and it looks like the tread is basically like brand new. There might be a little bit of wear on the outside edge right around here, but on the top part of the tire, everything looks really good here. If you look at this from the front, it still looks almost brand new. It's actually a pretty good quality tire, and these are 5.1 inches high, so they're pretty standard. You can get replacement tires for these at your local RC store. Now let's talk about the transmitter that came along with it. It is a 2.4 standard transmitter radio. It does have some sort of digital buttons here on the front of it for steering and your throttle reverse. It has an on-off button here, and this is going to make it go forward, and if you push up, it's going to make it go backwards. I felt like the reverse was a little bit delayed, and I guess that's set up on purpose like that. You also have dual rates up here, but this radio, in my opinion, I feel like it's lacking a little bit as far as how awesome the car is, and everything on here is great. I feel like the radio is kind of like a second afterthought to this, so I think the radio could be a little bit better. If you decided to really drive this car a lot, you could get another better, decent radio and bind it up to this car for a little better driving experience. But it does have a rubber grip around the outside of the wheel. It kind of looks like plastic on the video, but it's actually rubber. So driving it was not a big deal with this transmitter, but it feels decent. But I definitely think this could be maybe a little bit better. And it does take 4 AA batteries on the bottom. And the label on the bottom of the radio is HT3GDS. And if you guys are wondering what the scale is on this, like I said before, it is a 1/10 scale, and it has a 270 millimeter wheelbase on this RC truck. And what really freaked me out about the trailer for this car, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but on GearBest's site, they have it driving in salt water. I wouldn't drive anything RC in salt water, not even some of my waterproof drones would I really want to land in salt water. If you do drive this in salt water, wash it off immediately, because you're going to have almost immediate corrosion on a lot of these steel parts on this car. So as long as you keep it in the fresh water and just rinse it off after you're done, it should be just fine. Alright guys, let's go ahead and end up this review, and let's talk about some star ratings really quickly. We're going to talk about 3 different aspects. We're going to talk about the durability, the driving aspect of it, and we're going to talk about the power system. And we'll start out with the durability factor. The durability factor is really high on this car. Now, it took everything that I threw at it. I jumped it off bike jumps on the trail. We bashed it around the course, and I took it out on the concrete. I took it over to a nice gravel pit where we had a huge hill, and it survived pretty much everything we threw at it, even some of the other drivers driving it straight through water. Everything came back to my house working, which is kind of amazing for an RC car, especially when 2 other guys the same day went home with water damage. This one's still running. And the other cars, by the way, that left the track that day not working, those were name brand RC cars. So I'm definitely going to give it a 4.5 out of 5 for durability. Now let's talk about the drivetrain on here and the system itself, the steering and maneuverability of it. While I think the steering is great, I feel like the overall handling can maybe be a little bit better, but it still does handle pretty well for how heavy and durable this truck is. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 for the handling and maneuverability. I'm going to take 1 point off, mainly because I felt like it was a little bit sluggish in the corners. And finally, for the power system on this truck, it's a pretty decent motor on here, but I feel like it really wakes up on 3S. But then again, if you run it on 3S, you might be compromising some of the parts on here. So that's going to be up to you. If you want to see these tires balloon up, you're going to have to run it on 3S to get those tires to balloon up and get your maximum punch out of this. If you really want the top end on the throttle for the power system, you're going to have to do 3S. 2S works just fine, and if you're one of those guys that can just drive it all day and have fun with it on 2S, and not really worry too much about stuff breaking or compromising some of those plastic parts in there, you can have tons of fun on 2S, no problem. But overall, like I said, I think it's a pretty good truck. I think it's worth the money, and I would definitely get one if this was a birthday gift for my son or daughter, if they wanted to get into RC racing, or they just wanted kind of a basher. This is not really, like I said, going to be a racer per se. It's going to be more of a basher car, because like one of my friends said out of the track, who drives all the time and races competition racing, he said that he had a hard time keeping the front end down, so it might be a little bit tail heavy in the jumps. So it definitely is more of a basher, but it's an awesome one. I think you would have a lot of fun with it. I did, and I think the guys were impressed that day that it left the track still working, when the other 2 guys took name brand RC cars home that didn't work, that were totally shorted out. So overall, a pretty good truck. So thanks again for hanging out with me and watching this review, guys. I'm Justin Davis, and this has been the Team Magic E5HX 1/10 scale RC monster truck. Take care, guys. I'll see you on the next one.